We're actually really happy to bring this presentation to you today, and it's a continuation of conversations we've been having with young people about the whole process of building back better. Just last year, we had a discussion with some young persons on the reopening of schools and how to navigate mental health during COVID-19. And during that process, we understood that necessarily during the lockdown period, things became very difficult for young people, especially those living with NCDs. Which is why I'm happy today that we can have this conversation once more with the panelists, all students, with the exception of Dr. Caetano, who can be able to present their experiences, present their tips, and again, we can flourish a discussion about mental health in children within the school environment. Now, following with the 2020 theme for World Mental Health Day, which was to invest in young people, the Healthy Caribbean Coalition continues to show our support for having young persons institutionalized in our programs by presenting this presentation to you today. We continue to have an engagement of young persons from across the region through our Healthy Caribbean Youth initiative. And today, our moderators who will be leading the discussion are from that group. We have Ms. Tara Amor, and she's a clinical psychologist in training at UWI Mona. And we also have Ms. Ashley Foster Estwick, who is a research coordinator at the George Allen Chronic Disease Research Center. So I will hand over to them, and I encourage you when you listen in today to, in our question and answer box, share the questions or comments that you have for the panelists.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Pierre. It is a pleasure to co-host today's webinar with my colleague, Tara. As a young leader for the My Mind, Our Humanity campaign, I have been able to examine youth perspectives on transforming global mental health. One recent survey done in collaboration with UNICEF used the YouReport data collection platform tool to capture the opinions of over 40,000 young people. These young people reported that a lack of information about mental health or a lack of awareness about how to make a difference limited their engagement to improve the well-being of their communities. The young people, however, did aspire to support their peers and considered schools to be a critical sphere of influence where they could have the most impact. There is therefore growing evidence that suggests school-wide interventions can remove barriers for young people's active participation in mental health initiatives and enhance their demand for mental health services. I'll now hand the forum over to Tara, who will share her insights on cultivating healthy school environments from the perspective of a trainee clinical psychologist.
Thank you so much, Ashley. And I could not be more excited to get into the discussion with our exceptional panelists this afternoon. In my time as a trainee clinical psychologist, I have worked with a number of school-age children across the intersection of mental health. I've worked with students with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder who are struggling to transition to online learning. I've worked with teachers who are finding it difficult to make the accommodations necessary for their students' optimal learning. And in some extreme cases, I've even seen acute mental illness develop as a result of the isolation and anxiety that we are all suffering as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So believe me when I say this webinar could not be coming at a better time. I am honored to be a part of the Healthy Caribbean Coalition's continued commitment to navigating mental health and facilitating healthy school environments across the Caribbean region. So without further ado, let's hear from some of our panelists. Danielle, would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Danielle Treasure. I'm 17 years old and I'm from Barbados. I'm a competitive swimmer and I hope to share my perspective as a student athlete.
Thank you, Danielle. Caro, would you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, my name is Caro Knight. I'm 18 years old. I'm from Antigua and Barbuda, and I'm here to share my experience as a type 1 diabetic and, well, a college student too.
Thank you very much. And Priyanka?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Priyanka Lala. I'm 14 years old. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm a UNICEF youth advocate, and I'm very excited to share my perspective today.
Thank you. We're very excited to have all of your perspectives today. And last but most certainly not least, Alan, would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, good day, everyone. I am Alan Splant. I am a 16-year-old fifth form student of the St. Mary's College, St. Lucia. I am the president of the St. Mary's College Student Council, the vice president for districts 1 to 4 on the St. Lucia National Students Council, and a youth parliamentarian there. And I do look forward to giving my perspectives from student governance.
Thank you, Alan. So let's dive right into the discussion. As a leader in your community, Alan, I am sure you must observe some of the experiences of your peers. What are some of the concerns you think they might have regarding their mental health, both before and now during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, speaking from a student perspective, it's one of the major concerns that we got, well, from a student leader perspective, to bring to different administrations, etc., was that of our students, their mental health was severely impacted in this time, staying away from friends, less interaction, etc. This had a major impact on the productivity of our students. In the case where a child who is not mentally stable cannot produce proper work because they don't have the proper environment to produce that work. So this was one of the biggest concerns. And then whereafter, let's say at St. Mary's College, at St. Mary's College in St. Lucia, we have a school we have excellent footballers, we have excellent sportsmen. And during the breaks, etc., during the recess, students get to relieve class stresses from playing football, etc. And when a student didn't have that, it really affected them in the school. So this was one of the major concerns that I realized happened post-pandemic, well, in the pandemic now, when it relates to mental health and students.
All right, Alan, so you definitely bring up there's less interaction and students are no longer really in school. So I wonder what some of our other panelists think about this rise in online learning, which you are alluding to. We know many students now, they can no longer interact with their peers and caregivers face-to-face. They're being taught remotely. So Priyanka, I know you have been studying online for the past 6 months. What has your experience been like?
Yes, I've been attending online school for almost a year now, and it has been quite an eye-opening experience. I've been attending all my classes online, like many of the children here in Trinidad and Tobago, due to the COVID-19 restrictions. And I've been trying to stay proactive and productive by exercising, playing with my dogs, starting home projects like my organic garden, keeping up with martial arts. But I do miss the physical contact and the ability to attend school like normal and see my friends and my teachers and my other peers as well.
So how do you think your school has accommodated for those students, well, vulnerable students who are now transitioning into this online schooling?
I think my school has done a great job of helping the students, but in Trinidad and Tobago, in both primary and secondary schools, a lot of children have been denied the opportunity to even go to school on an online platform. This is because many children across my country don't have access to digital devices like computers or tablets, and some may have the devices, but they don't have access to internet or sustained electricity, or may not even know how to use the devices. So while many teachers and authority figures are trying and they are putting the children first, many children still do not feel included and are unable to participate. And due to this, a recent report has shown that many students have dropped out of school, and as students, they're finding jobs due to the socioeconomic needs of their family. And these children may be lost to the education system and may never return to school at all. And we also face issues like unsuitable home conditions where there's a lack of parental support. And in some cases, with the home environment, it is not conducive to online schooling, and it is cramped, congested, and uncomfortable for online school. So this challenge is daunting, and all unsupervised children are at risk. But the reports indicate that children from lower socioeconomic status face an even greater risk. And in my country, we also face issues in regards to children with disabilities, with young people who may have disabilities and who they desperately need the given guidance and the resources to help them, especially at a time like this. And children with disabilities face an even greater risk because their parents or their guardians may not be able to facilitate for their needs and may not be trained to properly guide them. And children with disabilities generally need one-on-one support, and they need the special resources like Braille books, auditory softwares, or even just someone there physically to help them. And in Trinidad, another issue that we saw was the lack of meals. A lot of students and a lot of children and a lot of young people relied on the meals that their school provided because it was their main meal of the day. That's where they got all their nutrients. And this compounds the problem because we need the nutrients to support our diets and to concentrate, to develop, and to grow as young people. And it's very difficult to focus and to maintain a healthy lifestyle and a healthy mental lifestyle without all of these resources. You know, an entire generation may be denied an education because of the multitude of challenges that are being faced during this pandemic. And these are major issues because not only are these children being denied their opportunity to grow and learn and strengthen their skills, they are being denied the basic right to an education altogether.
Thank you very much, Priyanka.
Wow, that is so spot on and really highlights the importance of a healthy school environment. And Priyanka, thank you for sharing your experience, which has been critically different in schooling as a result of COVID-19. And you've also touched on the importance of continued education, equitable access to education resources, and support for students across the board. Caro, as someone living with type 1 diabetes, a non-communicable disease, which would put you in an at-risk category, how do you think your experience has been different from your peers?
Hi, okay, so as a diabetic, stress is already a contributing factor to the way my body functions, especially in regards to my mental health. On a typical day, I tend to go through a series of thoughts or even a mental breakdown or so when I think about how poorly my diabetes may be. And I know that's a thought for a lot of diabetics out there, especially youths with diabetes, whether it's type 1 or type 2. So you can only imagine how overwhelmed I'd feel as a student battling and balancing classes while combating the possibility of contracting COVID, knowing I'm a high-risk patient and seeing the trends in COVID cases that's been taking place. Some days I feel like I can't function. I'd simply have no motivation to do anything really because of how confused and worn out I'd feel.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Well, sorry for cutting in. I just am very, I guess, overwhelmed by the responses from Carol. You touched on the fact that young people now, they're more likely to fall into unhealthy practices. You talked about feelings of demotivation and just being overwhelmed and how worse, I guess, chronic conditions are getting now during this pandemic, like diabetes, etc. So because we know the pandemic has transformed our social interactions and put a number of activities on pause, it has in many ways affected everyone. So it would be good to get a different perspective. Danielle, as a student athlete, how has this time been for you?
Yeah, so obviously because of COVID, the after school activities, swimming, it all had to get canceled. And as an athlete who's used to seeing your teammates every day and used to training twice a day, for that all to stop, it became a little bit of a challenge to stay motivated and to stay positive and also to keep that fitness level up. And obviously once you stop, to get back into it can be quite difficult. And so that not only affects your physical, but also your mental health. And as we know, sports have many benefits, not just staying physically fit, but also provides a social circle for you, time management, teamwork skills, and also it's extremely critical to your mental health. So seeing kids at home doing school online, you see them sitting down and not being active so much. And so they're not getting all these skills that they could be getting from the physical activity. And that affects their mental health. You see a rise in stress, depression, and anxiety amongst these students. So for me, it was all about becoming more creative in staying connected and staying active, using technology. And also we have the advantage of living in the Caribbean where it is warm year round. So when you were allowed to go outside, you could run or you could go down to the beach and swim, which I definitely took advantage of.
Oh, awesome. So I love that you brought up these creative solutions to keeping active, and you touched on the fact that we have the lovely beaches here in the Caribbean. I'm pretty sure that as we go deeper into this discussion, we'll talk a little bit more about these creative physical activities that other young people can get involved in to stay active during this time.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing your experience, Danielle. And I commend you on the creativity that you've used to make sure that you can still stay physically active. And thank you for raising the point of the relationship between physical health and mental health, because they truly cannot be separated. And on that note, Caro, I was wondering, how do you think that your school what do you wish that your school would understand about you and other vulnerable students during this time who don't have the same physical health or opportunities that some of the other students might have?
Well, when it comes to other vulnerable students such as myself, I feel like it's key for schools to understand that there are varying situations and ways they could go about things. So teachers and institutions alike should try to be more patient, more understanding, try to understand that we're all going through the pandemic together. So we're all going through different phases, different effects. So just try to be more considerate, more patient, just try to understand like we all need time. We all need time to reach these standards that the school have set, and we still have to look out for ourselves. So just be more patient, be more understanding.
Absolutely. And as Priyanka said, we really need to emphasize equitable access to education for all. And that includes the experience, not just the resources. So now that we've spoken about some of your experiences and the unique circumstances that we're each experiencing this collective pandemic in, we would like to understand some of the solution steps that we can take, we at the Healthy Caribbean Coalition can begin to discuss to improve the access to mental health services in the school systems. So for all of our panelists, you've each spoken about your experience within the school environment. Could you each provide an overview of what support systems you know to currently exist within your school to assist students who may be struggling to navigate their mental health? We'll start with you, Caro.
Okay, so previously, Alan was speaking on the need for support and more advocacy. And really, in my country, that's something I feel like we lack, because we have a diabetes association here, but you don't really ever have much support other than that in regards to students' mental health. And with schools, a lot of schools lack that as well. There aren't many groups that support different health cases or just there for mental health in general. I feel like a lot of schools need to have that built in or try to set it in stone something, because I realize it's an issue that is becoming very popular in schools. So I do believe that even though it's not something popular in the Caribbean per se, I think it needs to be instilled because a lot of schools don't have it.
I couldn't agree more. And Priyanka, what has your experience been?
Yes, well, with online school, my school has been very supportive and taken into consideration our mental health. So we've been having outdoor activities, guidance counselors, we've been having open communication and even just checking up on each other. I think that the idea of just checking up on one another and having a simple conversation was really helpful. You know, just going in a breakout room and talking to your friend and saying, hi, how are you? How has online school been going for you? Is there anything I can help with? You know, just that simple conversation, I think, was so effective for me, especially. And I think that effective communication is so essential to help young people address their mental health issues, and, you know, communicating with counselors and teachers. And I think all of that comes together to build a sense of connectivity.
Absolutely. And you and Caro have both touched on the importance of peer-to-peer support and being there for each other in this trying time. And you also mentioned outdoor activities and being able to keep up with some semblance of normal outside of the online school environment. Danielle, what has your experience been with support?
So I think I've been extremely lucky in terms of the support for mental health. Last year in fifth form, I had my CSEC exams, and you know that can be quite stressful. So at school, we had these days called Spirit Days once a month, where it was just activities outside to help kids with stress. And also I've been really lucky with all now, especially with online school, the workload can feel like a lot. So the teachers have made themselves more available outside of class time. And I think that's an extreme help to kids who may want to talk to a teacher one-on-one and not within a class, especially since it's online. And so I found that it's been a great help for me.
I'm very glad to hear that you've had a positive experience so far. And you highlight that it's not just peers that need to support each other, but also the administrators and the higher ups, if I may. So Alan's, what has your experience been like as a facilitator between the students and the administrators?
Well, I mean, there are plenty of solutions that we came up with here in St. Lucia, and especially I can speak reference from the St. Mary's College, St. Lucia. We understood how important it was and that all sectors were being affected in the pandemic. So what we did was that we had counseling services for our teachers, our students, and our parents virtually, so that they would understand and get the feel of what's going on and how to adapt and persevere. We also had, well, not from St. Mary's, but from different schools, from the St. Joseph's Convent, they had virtual Soca Fit sessions on Zoom. There were different movie sessions with the girls to keep them occupied and to know that, it's a very hard time. So we can all keep together and do this at that point. And we realized too that a lot of students prefer venting to their peers. So we have at what you call at St. Mary's College and at other secondary schools in St. Lucia, what you have a peer counselors or peer helpers program, where you have a cohort of students who are supervised and who are trained by our counselors to go into that process so that they can be a brother's keeper or be a sister's keeper. And it came in handy a lot in a time like that. And we also asked for increased advocacy in our countries, and this was something Carol mentioned earlier, and we need more advocacy platforms for our students. So in that case, we built foundations for different advocacy groups on behalf of students, especially being affected in a time like this.
Oh, wow. This is all very good. I'm happy to hear about the wonderful school-based support structures in the different islands. We know that for young people, well, young students, they're now learning to navigate young adulthood. So they become easily influenced by their peers. So I really like that you touched on this peer helpers program, Alan's, because I do know that the opinions of young people tends to trump the opinions of the family and the teachers from time to time. And that's how you get the negative peer pressure. So we want to avoid that and focus on positive peer support networks. So Carol, I know that you continue to be an advocate for peer-to-peer support in the school environment. Can you tell me some of the ways that you've seen your peers supporting each other? Some examples, please.
Okay, so from a personal point of view, in regards to support, I've had friends be a simple shoulder to cry on or listening ear. Sometimes it's little things like random check-ins to see how I'm coping, even during the pandemic, before, in between, after, it's been like that. I've seen peers do extensive research on a friend's health condition to be more educated on the subject or to be more sensitive towards things they may not completely understand, just so that they can be a wall to lean on when things are hard to keep up with. Giving words of reassurance as well is something I've realized that's become very common in peers. So it's something more like, let me try to help you even though I don't understand what's going on.
I like that. So how do you think we can improve opportunities for students to access this kind of peer counseling?
Well, first off, I think that, I feel like, friends should be more open, try to give them a little insight into what you go through so that they won't be so confused and so lost as to what you're going through. Just let them feel comfortable, communicating with you. So while you're venting, they're listening and they could feel comfortable doing it with you too.
Okay, thank you for that. So you definitely highlight that young people can, intervene in programs and solutions to reduce mental health stigma and discrimination, and also to be a shoulder for their other friends and so forth to lean on, as you said. So my next question is actually going to go to Danielle, because I would like to get her perspective. as a student athlete, how do you think we can strengthen these existing programs like the peer counselors and the guidance counselors? How do you think we can strengthen these programs in the school?
Yeah, so as we've seen, there is a connection between physical and mental health. So I think in terms of peer support, by schools providing and promoting activities and extracurriculars, whether it be in school or outside of a school day, that would really benefit these students, their mental health. And it also would increase their productivity, because students sitting down for so long, it's not good and they don't get as much effective work done. So it would also provide a break from the strenuous workload that's piled on to students by schools, and it would help alleviate stress. And we have also seen that exercising releases hormones, which boost your mood and improve self-esteem, which would contribute to the student's mental health. And it's great to see that many schools have extracurriculars and activities in place, but I think these need to be more catered towards the interest of the majority of the students and promoted better to create a positive environment so that students can try new activities, learn new skills, meet people, go outside of their regular social circle, and also take a mental break from schoolwork. And I think to do that, the extracurriculars should be suggested by the majority of students, so activities that they're interested in. And it doesn't have to be just sports, really anything to give them a break from school. So it could be drama, arts, music, or even academic clubs, just things that students are interested in. And I think the participation should really be encouraged by schools. And this should be done not only having competitive clubs, but for recreational as well, because I think students get a little discouraged if they're participating in something and they feel like they have to be the best to participate in it. So really just have recreational and also competitive for those who want to be competitive. And also a major point I'm going to mention is, as a student athlete, I benefited in my exams from continuing these extracurriculars during exam times. And I know people think that during exams, that means you stop everything else you're doing, but it is extremely beneficial to keep doing these things to reduce stress, and overall it would help with your exams. These activities obviously would be student-led. I think that helps with the peer mentorship that Kira was talking about. And this also helps them with leadership, and it helps them with teamwork. But would need to be monitored by an adult just to keep the environment positive and in case any problems arise. And it's also quite difficult for these during COVID, but I think schools should definitely be looking at it for the future and in terms of long term.
I definitely agree with you. I believe that right now, yes, things are a little bit different with the COVID pandemic, but future investment in safe spaces for students to engage in extracurricular activities is necessary, because we know physical activity balanced with academia can lead to positive health outcomes. So let's hear what Priyanka has to say.
Yes, well, I definitely believe that effective communication is essential to help young people address their mental health. So I think that teachers and counselors should be retrained to deal with mental health amongst young people, as well as young people with disabilities at this time, because the conditions are different and the way we manifest our mental health challenges in different ways now that we are on this online platform. And we're away from, the normal school system, and we're in isolation at home, that I think the public sector needs to listen to young people and work with them as well. Young people are aware of the problems that affect them, and they're eager to use their voice and speak up for what they want to stand up for. And we must empower them and empower the relevant bodies to assist them. And I have actually already been collaborating with the OPM and the Children's Authority on these issues that affect young people. At the beginning of the year, I met with Commissioner Police Guy Griffith on child abuse and the urgency of addressing this matter, because in my country especially, domestic abuse and violence is very prevalent, and it's an issue that a lot of children face, and a lot of children and young people are at risk because of this. And I think greater awareness is required, and it's needed more than ever. And it takes a village to raise a child. So there must be collaboration amongst public, private, and civil societies to help vulnerable children to be their voice and to help find solutions to improve their current conditions. And I think, we can even come up with simple solutions, like there can be a TV program to address mental health issues amongst children, to build that awareness and educate adults and parents and guardians and teachers so that they will be able to identify when children are at risk. And we can even have, hotlines or counseling systems put in place to help these children maintain healthy mental health.
Your point on multisectorality is definitely valid as it relates to cultivating healthy school environments. Tara, do you have any further questions for Priyanka?
I think Priyanka and Danielle have done a great job of exhibiting exactly why we need to have this conversation today, and touching on the importance of social interaction and involvement and resilience, and how all of these things are facilitated in the school environment. One of the key considerations at the heart of creating healthy school environments is the children's right to health, which includes optimal mental health. After speaking to all of our panelists today, I think we can all agree that it's crucially important to listen to the voices of the students about their experiences and let them speak on the critical issues that impact their education and ultimately their futures, and by extension, our collective futures. So Allens, from your experience working with the government in various capacities, including as a youth parliamentarian, what are some changes you believe that government entities can and or should make in order to facilitate more youth engagement in providing support for their mental health?
Again, thank you for your question, Tara. There's no greater question, I think, for now, especially being in the position as a youth parliamentarian and a student advocate. I think it's one thing that government entities should always remember, is that the decisions that happen on top will always affect us as young people in the bottom. And we have every right to be part of policy decision making in the country. And I think that is one way that governments can reach out. It can either be, they can either channel it through the youth organizations or go to the grassroots themselves, because not all young people are part of those organizations, and go to the grassroots themselves and find out what is going on. Arrange different sessions with different groups, different as it pertains to mental health and keeping safe, etc., with young people. Webinars like this to engage young people, well, in the grassroots, for those who can't afford a laptop to do it, to find the resources necessary to engage young people specifically in decision making as it pertains to topics like this.
Yes, thank you so much, Allens. And I think that you are very well poised to make these comments and speak from experience here. And I know that each of our panelists have had their own experiences and offer their own contributions. Ashley, do you have any more questions for the remaining panelists?
I do not at this time. In fact, I want to thank all of them for their contributions. Each of you is clearly passionate about shaping healthy school environments. I think Tara and I want to reiterate the importance of youth voices in advocating for healthy environments and other worthy causes. So, because we know young people want to share their opinions and they require a platform on which to do it, I have two questions for the panelists. Well, I do have two final questions for the panelists. The first question is, if you had a friend who was interested in becoming an advocate for a worthy cause, let's say for, healthy eating, etc., what advice would you give to him or her? I'll start with you, Carol.
The very first thing I would say, which is basically covering the basis of what I want to say, is just go for it. Don't be hesitant, because you don't really need an established group or an organization to be an advocate. Start small with research, as I mentioned before, and educate family and friends. It doesn't have to be anyone abroad for now. Just start off with people you're comfortable with and just try to branch off using social media, because that's something that's pretty popular between youths and adults alike. And social media has a lot of power. Just spread the word, bring about awareness any positive way you can. Start off small and just try to build your way up from there.
Sounds good to me. Allens, what about you? Any advice for your friend who wants to become an advocate?
Well, honestly, and I think it's one thing that I tell all my friends who want to be advocates, well, it's three things I want to tell them. The first one, Mahatma Gandhi said, to be the change you wish to see in the world. And there is nothing that can limit you but in being positive change. Don't quote me wrong, in positive change to be. And to bring light to those who don't have it and to kindle theirs so that they can continue and to just spread it. Also, as an advocate, always remember to make time for yourself. Your mental health is important. Your being is important, because while you have the voices of others on your back, you have to make sure that you're intact to go forward to do it. And one last thing is that to always keep your chin up. And I said that because a few days ago, I was a talk of the town when my students' council in St Lucia were being attacked by party operatives in the country because we stood up for the rights of students, asked pertinent questions, and then they questioned us. And then when you know things like that happen, and you do it for the people who elected you and who you're advocating for, you're doing a right thing. And you will always have stones being thrown at you. You will always have sticks. People want to beat you with sticks, etc. But you have to know, once you're doing the right thing, you must always keep your chin up, always propel ahead, and always be positive if you would want to be an advocate.
Very well said. So you definitely think perseverance is something that advocates need to learn as they navigate the advocacy field. So Priyanka, what about you? Any advice for a friend?
I definitely agree with what everyone has said so far. I would just encourage my friend to use their voice and stand up for what they are passionate about and what they believe in and what they want to stand up for. They have the right to use their voice and they have the power to use it and make a difference. I think once they're passionate about what they have to say and once they use their voice proudly, I think that their voice can be heard worldwide.
Thank you. And Danielle?
I totally agree with what everyone has said. I would also say to research and form your own opinion and form discussions, and also to listen and learn from other people as well. Like, I have learned so much from the discussions we've had and all the other advocates on this panel.
Okay, so I know that you guys would need some support, or your friends would also need support as they do their advocacy work. So how do you think school administrations, public and private sector, and civil society can help with the work of young advocates or aspiring advocates? So Allens, I'll give the question about school administrations to you. How do you think they can support your work?
Well, we always act as a student, being president of a student-led organization, it is important that the administration hears from us, given that we come with the ideas and they're the policy makers at the school. So we asked, and it's one thing that Kara was mentioning frequently, that there's a lack of advocacy in the school. So we would want to appeal to principals who's listening, to understand the purpose of a student's council. Because in St. Lucia, like we always mention to our principal, there's a principals association. There's an association which represents principals. There's an association or union which represents teachers. Don't you think students should have the avenue to where there is a specific body to represent them? So it's one plea to school administrators that the importance of a students' council, a well-structured students' council, to advocate on behalf of the students, to bring it into the school system, to roll it into the school system. And it's not only just for student council's sake, but to mold the consciousness and the minds of our young people to be leaders and to be progressive thinkers of society.
Okay, Carol, what about civil society? How can they help?
Okay, so civil society organizations such as Rotaract, JCI, Antigua and Barbuda Diabetes Association, and any other organization really, whether it's regional or locally, can help boost advocacy work in youths by providing a platform for them to bring general awareness to the public. This includes webinars, hosting public speaking meetings where these advocates will have the opportunity to reach larger audiences in their communities, or even ask advocates how their organization can assist in shedding light on their purpose as an advocate.
Okay, so you have a purpose-driven model for things. What about the private sector? I'll give that question to Danielle. How can they help?
Yeah, so definitely private sectors who share common goals to these advocates, internships, mentorships, just teaching these young people leadership qualities as well, and also funding and helping to promote these student initiatives. So for example, in terms of after schools and extracurriculars, yes, it may not require a lot of costs, and also in terms of mental support programs, but providing these students and young people with the tools and the funds they need would definitely help out.
Thank you. That means that, Priyanka, you have to speak about the public sector support.
Well, I would definitely say that public sector has a huge role in supporting these advocates. And similarly to what Kero said, I think that having a platform where these children and where these young people can be heard is so important. We can have media platforms where it can be something as simple as a local news program where young people can talk about what they are passionate about. They can share ideas, they can come together, share ideas, give each other thoughts, build and create innovative solutions to help each other and solve the issues that they are facing in their communities. We can even have hotlines or radio talk shows where these young people are given a prominent platform in society that they are looked at to as a priority. A lot of times they aren't put as a priority, and young people's voices aren't set as a priority. And I think that setting them as a priority and putting them high up in the media will have a huge impact.
Very well said. I think that's why we're having this conversation today, to prioritize the youth voices. And Tara, do you want to expand on anything that was said?
I've been sitting here trying to take notes of all of the things that our panelists have said that have inspired me or made me want to go do my own research or take action in my own way, and I've literally run out of space on my paper. I am so impressed by the conversation that we've had today. I am blown away by the advocacy and the initiative and the camaraderie of our panelists. And I think I would just like to take this opportunity to thank them, congratulate them, and encourage them to continue doing what they're doing. I, for one, feel hopeful about the future because of this conversation. So unless anyone else has any thoughts or anything else they'd like to add, we do have some closing remarks by Dr. Caetano. We'd like to begin closing remarks by underscoring the potentially devastating impact of the pandemic on the mental health of children and young people and other key actors in the school environment, and the urgency to implement programmatic safety nets and share strategies for young people to better cope with mental health challenges. Dr. Caetano, would you mind introducing yourself to the panel and giving your input?
Hi, good afternoon. Tara, like yourself, or Miss Tara, sorry, like yourself, I'm blown away for the insightfulness of our panelists. You guys are brilliant. I'm sure your parents and yourself are very, very proud of where you are now. Continue doing this job, doing this work. Definitely we will be able to make some changes. It's not just about having a conversation, it's actually to be able to make actions. So recently, I work with PAHO. I'm by I'll be saying that my name is Claudia Cayetano. I work with Pan American Health Organization. I work as the advisor for mental health. And I was telling Tara in my introduction that my first love, I'm a psychiatrist. So as a psychiatrist, I used to see people with mental health disorder, adolescents with different issues such as anxiety, depression, eating disorder, sleeping disorder, people, bipolar illness, and of course, suicide. So clearly, and then when I was hearing the introduction, I thought it was so interesting to be part of this panel that when the panelists were introducing themselves, they say, my name is so-and-so, and I'm 14 years old. Well, you can guess the age is different, but I feel youthful at heart, and I'm very happy to be part of this conversation because it's my belief that public and private elementary, middle, and high school should provide and facilitate appropriate mental health services to the countries. And why do we have to care for that? We have to care because mental health conditions first appear in youth and young adults. So we talk about 50% of all conditions developing by the age of 14 and 75% by the age of 24. So these are massive numbers that we are not to ignore. And of course, this is before COVID, and with COVID now, it's even maximize these things. I know that some of the panelists were talking about the impact of COVID in terms of their isolation, they're not being able to connect with friends. But you may be surprised that there were some adolescents who suffer from panic disorders or anxiety, or agoraphobia or claustrophobia. They're happy to be isolated. But that's again is a warning sign. They need treatment. They need to be identified, and they should be able to get early diagnosis so that they can be treated. Because we're saying that less than half of youth with mental conditions receive any kind of treatment. So this is something that we want to be concerned about. So they go undiagnosed, they go untreated, and if they are treated, sometimes it's inadequately treated. So when someone has a mental condition, this interferes with their ability to learn, with the ability to grow, with the ability to develop. Since most children and adolescents spend much time of their productive time in educational settings, so schools provide a unique opportunity to identify and treat mental health conditions. So this is what I think, what we could do as a group. And I know I was very pleased and I accepted the invitation because I know of the trajectory of the Health Coalition in the Caribbean. You will be able to make changes demanding that schools have school mental health literacy programs, that schools have a mental health policy, that I know that can happen. Very few, to my knowledge, very few schools have school mental health programs. We have done some training for school mental health literacy for teachers, because as you know, it is very important that we engage teachers in becoming literate in mental health. Why that is relevant? Because they will be able to look at the kids when they're not working well, when they're not doing well, when they're not performing, and rather than thinking that is a behavioral problem, which is sometimes what they do, is that this is something that can be diagnosed. So what are we looking for? We are looking for breaking the silence. We are looking for increasing help-seeking behavior. We are looking for decreasing stigma and discrimination. So it is definitely important that there's investment in children's adolescent mental health, because it improves their lives and their families. And when they get diagnosed earlier, they get the right care at the right time, we can definitely prevent negative outcomes like school failure, hospitalization, and sometimes even suicide. Thanks for the opportunity to be with you. It is been a great pleasure.
Thank you very much for your input. And, I think you pulled in elements from what each of our panelists mentioned. I know that Caro is very cares a lot about advocacy and making sure that we decrease stigma around health and mental health illnesses. And I know that all of our panelists here are great advocates and can speak from experience on what they have done personally and what they've seen their peers do to improve the healthy school environments. Would you mind giving us your input on what elements within schools, within the administration system or the environment itself would allow for optimal mental health, including physical health as it impacts mental health and healthy foods and activities?
So when we're talking about the panelists, and I think it was Priyanka talking about the importance of all of the panelists, actually. I mean, they did a fantastic job. I was impressed. Talking about, you know, what the teachers can do. And I know the teachers mean well, believe me, teachers, parents, I'm a parent. And I, before becoming a doctor, I also, my first degree was in teaching. So I do believe that it's important, you know, the teachers also are human beings. But you need, importantly, Ms. Tara, is funding. I think we need to make sure we advocate for funding that is necessary to coordinate school-based mental health services. So we don't want to say the teacher should do that, or the parents should do that, the adolescents should do that. No, if there is funding that is allocated for school mental health services, then we'll be able to, you know, that's part of the advocacy. So we want to be able to bring, you know, have the conversation. Yes, we want to make sure that there is discussions, that there is guidance, but then there has to have some funding, because most time what happens, as we all know, they don't have enough school counselors. They don't have enough places where they can get services. So the problems go. There's a lot of silence about mental health. There's a lot of stigma. I was very impressed about some of the panels when they talk about, you know, like the panelists who talk about their diagnosis with diabetes. And if we know that mental health, 1 in 5 has a depression, 1 in 5 adolescents can have a depression. So most likely we can have adolescents with mental health disorders in the schools. They're not being diagnosed. And so they go under the radar. So I think it's relevant that we think of funding, and that funding is, you know, will allow us to do more investment in mental health.
I completely agree. And I know Danielle would too, speaking about how the private sector can get involved and really enhance the opportunities for health in schools and for youth across the region. Last but most certainly not least, I know that Alan's and Danielle and each of our panelists have touched on the importance of peer-to-peer support. In your field and as a professional in the mental health sphere, what are your thoughts on peer-to-peer support, how peers can appropriately support each other, and at what point an adolescent or a youth should turn to professional help?
Thank you, Ms. Tara. This is an excellent question, because why are we relying on peer-to-peer? Because of the limited human resources, limited school counselors. But then at the same time, when we talk about mental health literacy, we're also talking about the importance of understanding language matters. Definitely, language matters. So we need to make sure that peers have the information that is required. They know what are the signs and symptoms, and they know the limitations. Again, this is where we want to be able to make it easier for them to be able to do the referrals, appropriate referrals. When you have a school mental health literacy, when you have school mental health policy, these are the issues you want to capture before they become, because sometimes what happens is that if the person is very vocal and articulate, we'll select them. But that doesn't mean that they're going to be doing a good work. Because for us, what is very important is do no harm. And sometimes people don't know when to do no harm. Sometimes they mean well. We know they mean well. They want to help. But you need to know how to help. You need to know when to help, when to, you know, withdraw, and when to be present. So it's very important that they do have support in how to do that, because the do no harm is definitely, as you know, as you are practicing psychologist, you understand the importance of what do we mean when we say do no harm. We want to, it's not just that you want to help, it's that you need to know how, when to help. And this is something that I would think once we have a clear policy in schools, these are the issues that has to be then put on paper.
Yes, I completely agree. I couldn't have said it better myself. And I think that it's really important to recognize that peers supporting each other is exactly what we want and is a step in the right direction. But if peers and classmates are experiencing the same circumstances, everyone's going through COVID together, a lot of times there's this saying that misery loves company, but a lot of people will be leaning on someone who needs their own support, and seeking out professional help can allow for an hour of your day or an hour a week that is just for you, the individual, to talk about your experience, make sense of what you're going through, and have an empathetic listener who, like you said, will do no harm and is trained in the best way to treat with these experiences and allow someone to express themselves. Thank you so much for your input and your wisdom. I congratulate you and all of our panelists today on a really incredible conversation. I think it couldn't have come at a better time. We are going to turn over to a Q&A soon. I see some questions popping up in the chat, but before that, we're going to practice what we preach and take a quick fit break to get ourselves moving. So feel free to turn your cameras on or off, and Danielle Welwyn will lead us in an activity. That was a pretty awesome fit break. I'm sure many of us are energized. I hope that the panelists are ready to answer some questions from our attendees. So the first question is to everyone. What is one important thing that we can do to cope with our mental health? Allens, I'll give that question to you.
Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you now. I was worried.
Experiencing some laptop problems. So you see that basically you see the problems we go through in online classes on a daily basis. You know, our laptops give problems. But one thing that, what was the question again? Because I can't see it from the bottom.
What is one important thing that we can do? I imagine this is everyone, regardless of age, to cope with our mental health, but you can focus specifically on students since we're talking about the school environment. So what can students do to cope with their mental health at this point? One important thing. One.
Wow. Well, you see, for me, I'm trying to find the perfect way for myself to deal with, you know, my mental capacity now, handling all the work and then outside from school. I just think sometimes the best thing to do is to usually meditate and have a time for yourself. So what I would do is that I would turn on to YouTube and I would play maybe jazz music from St. Lucia, or there's what you call lo-fi or lofi. I'm not sure what they call it, but it's spelled L-O-F-I, where it has no lyrics. The music is just soothing, and then I sit and then I just go with the thing of the music, and then I just rejuvenate myself, try to, find myself back again and just stay calm, stay still, and, think of anything I did throughout the day or during the period I was out before that. And, think of better ways that I could have maybe handled the situation, etc. So this is one way I meditate to have, to fix that, what we call here the meds, the mentals.
Meditation. Danielle, what about you?
Yeah, so I could be different for every person. For me, I would say doing something active, as I'm an athlete, and doing things that you enjoy doing. I definitely say that's important for your mental health. So if you like exercise, if you like doing a certain activity, making sure you take time out of your week to do that activity and just have some time for yourself to do the things that you enjoy.
Okay. And Carol, what about you?
So my answer would basically be a combination of what Alan's and Danielle said. I am not exactly what you call athletic. So for me, I don't really do activities per se when I'm trying to cope mentally. I would more do something like painting, or like Alan said, I listen to lo-fi music as well, or lo-fi music. I would tend to just put down the phone, take some time out for myself, whether it's academically or just overall life. I would take a break. Sometimes I like to go on walks. The timing that varies, because you feel so relaxed after a while that you just end up staying out a bit. But just take a break. There's something I've always been told, even as a child, that even when you're working or as a student, if something is to go wrong with you, you're easily replaced. So you need to remember yourself in the midst of all that. You need to take breaks, you need to rest, you need to just rejuvenate, as Alan said.
Yes, okay. So Priyanka, do you have anything to add? One important thing.
I definitely agree with what everyone has said. I would just advise that you take time to do what you enjoy. Take time to partake in your hobbies or something that you enjoy. Like Kara said, she likes to paint. I know that Danielle is a great swimmer. So just take time to do things that you want to do and that you makes you feel relaxed and calm, and something that kind of meditates, taking a walk or just taking time off your device or off technology to enjoy the outside, to enjoy what you enjoy doing.
All right, thank you, Priyanka. We have another question here, and I will actually direct this to Dr. Caetano. Do you have any advice on motivation or maintaining healthy mindset? So I imagine this person is speaking to how do we maintain our healthy minds at this time? How do we keep healthy mentally?
Thank
Dr.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Ashley. I was listening to the panelists in terms of each one of them have their own, I guess, recipe. What works for you is definitely important to know yourself. So importantly is you need to know yourself. You need to know when you are not, because we tend to pretend sometimes as everything is going well, but we know that we are not well. So if you're not sleeping well, you're not eating, or you're not, you're feeling moody or uncomfortable. Know the signs that gets you out of your shell, because if you don't know that, then you won't know what to do. So I think what is important is that when you are aware of what are the signs and the symptoms that are affecting you, that causing you to not be motivated, to become demoralized, or to feel not having not wanting to engage, there must be a reason why that is happening. And so the idea here is that once you know yourself, then you know. So I always tell people, you start with the A, like the alphabet, A for awareness. Be aware on your signs and your symptoms. And then, you know, you want to, once you're aware what are the signs, the symptoms that cause you to not to be yourself, you're not feeling motivated, then you have to, it's important that you have to be doing, nowadays we've been encouraging people to become more, you know, talking about mindfulness, to be able to take a break, to be able to protect your mental health, and so that to re-energize. So that will help you to build back, you know, get more energy, get your sleep, and the issue of eating healthy and staying connected and have someone. Sometimes it's also good at the issue of having a, you know, someone that knows you, that you trust, that they know and that you listen to, because sometimes we have people we know we trust, but we don't follow their advice, we don't listen to them. But someone that you know that when they tell you, no, you're not yourself today, something is happening, that you're honest enough to admit that you are not doing well, so that they can help you or guide you, or then you know you're open to seek assistance. So that is important in terms of awareness. To me, that's definitely important, you know, number one, to become aware of that, because otherwise then you also become when you're not aware of that, and you don't know when to get the help, you don't know what to do, you don't know how to support yourself. So this or seek help. I hope this helps to get people to become more comfortable about speaking about mental health, because motivation has to do sometimes with your concentration, with your level of energy, with things that you're seeking in life that sometimes it's not happening your own way. So you need to be able to have a good understanding of that. I don't want to make recommendations. Just, you know, I think each one of you know what to do when you're not, when you want to be, you know, when you want to dealing with stress. But to me, more importantly, is the awareness that has to go with that. Thank you.
No, thank you. We have another question here from Michael Yearwood. As a senior student with duties as a senior prefect or head boy or head girl, how can I, as a student, help from at home? Dr. Caetano, you can answer that as well. So,
what was the question, Ms. Ashley?
As a senior student with duties as a senior prefect or head boy or head girl, how can I, as a student, help from at home?
Help from home, you said?
Yes.
I don't know if I understood the question. As a senior, the person wants to know
how can they support their peers from at home, given that they have.
How can they support? But this is the good thing that we have nowadays. So there's two things, because I was also looking at the chat, and there people are talking about, you know, spending so much time with on their devices. And so there was the issue of, and I didn't want to mention, you know, I guess that's why I became a bit confused. But you can, when you know each other, when you know yourself, you know when when you're friends, you know when your friends are not themselves. You know, there's signs there, their voices, the way how they look at you, the way how they dress, the way how they talk. So now more than ever, I think it's important that, you know, when we talk about facial expressions, especially in mental health, and, you know, in mental health, when I became a psychiatrist, you know, people will say, well, okay, we talk, we use talk therapy, right? And like, you don't, the evaluation is by looking at someone and understanding what they are going through. So I think this is an important thing. Through the camera, through the connections, and through sometimes even text, you know when someone is not well, because these are your friends that prior to the COVID or during COVID, they have a way of connecting with you. But you can see sometimes when their expressions, their language, their it can help you to see that something is not going well. And then you want to be able to know, if you're friends and you're close, ask, don't dismiss them. I don't think it's appropriate to dismiss people, and I think it's important to ask how they're doing. I also don't believe in that, or if people, sometimes when people say, oh, because maybe they are manipulating you to do what they want. I don't believe in that. I believe that people genuinely may need help, genuinely want to be able to be supported. So ask and be there to see how you could support them. I know that the challenges of COVID is the physical distancing, but from PAHO, we normally don't say social distancing, we say physical distancing, because we are just physically apart from each other, we're emotionally connected. So we have a time when we connect, we start to see our emotions. And one of the things that we encourage, that when you're talking to people, if you're doing FaceTime, or if you Zoom, make sure, ask them if they can have their camera on, so you can see them, so you can see how they're doing, especially in a close, not in meetings, I'm not talking about meetings, I'm talking about intimate connections, so that also helps you to know what's happening, how they're doing. Of course, if it's a meeting, it's different, because you prepare for that, but when it's a regular conversation, then you'll be able to know through FaceTime when they're not doing well.
So definitely picking up on communication cues and so forth. Yeah. So, Allens, I know that you have a senior role in your school. So what advice would you give to this young person who wants to help from home, who is a head boy or head girl or senior prefect?
Well, it's something I mentioned earlier in the panel. What they do at my sister's school is that there is a sort of, they use their platform via Zoom. I think their school got a Zoom subscription. And what the head girl did, the head girl is the head prefect there. What she did was that she called all her students on. I think she did it via form, where she called all her students on, and they did a Soca Fit session. So there was a session like what Daniel did earlier. They did that, and then the students were engaged, their cameras were on, they were laughing. There was also a movie session. I think they shared the screen and then put on a movie there. So these are different ways as a senior student leader at your school or senior official at your school that you can use. And from what I heard was that it was excellent for them, because they got the normal feeling that they would have with their friends. They're just physically, according to Dr. Kitano, they're just physically apart, but there's still that emotional affection there. So it's one thing that you can try at your school.
Yes, it sounds like a very good rapport building exercise. We have one question now for everyone, for all of the panelists. So this person says, I want to be an advocate, but I do not have the guts to stand up for what I think is right. Any advice? Allens, do you want to answer this firstly?
Well, like I said earlier, what I can tell you is, again, once you know what you are doing is right, then go for it. Do not be limited. I mean, I love to be blatant when I say certain things, but I'm saying to you, now you're the only person who's really limiting yourself as to what you cannot, what you can do. Say to yourself, I can do it. Once I know it is right, go ahead. You want to be the change you want to see. You know what you're going to be advocating for. And once it is right, go ahead, do it, champion your cause, mobilize people to join with you, to understand what you're advocating for those who you're advocating for, know your people, and you'll be right ahead. Over the time, I think one thing about leadership too, you must be mentally strong in leadership, especially for me now in student governance, etc. And given that the organization that I'm in closely runs in political lines, etc., at the end of the day, when you're going to advocate really for something, you're going to be stepping on the toes of policymakers, etc. So, you're going to have people who are going to come at you, who are going to challenge you. So you need to be mentally strong. You need to know what you're about, and you just propel for what you want to do once you know it is right.
Okay.
Yeah, add to that one what Alan was saying, because I think it's so relevant what you were saying. Listen, first remember that nobody's born knowing. We have to practice, we have to learn, and we have to be comfortable. And then you also have to do your research. And and be honest, when you don't know, you don't know. But the more you practice, the more you learn, it becomes comfortable. So those things have to be practiced. I like that question. I think it's very important that you build the confidence and the comfort and the know-how to do that. So I thought I should add that. Then it becomes what I call sometimes your ADL, your activities of daily living, the comfort. So now we see Alan, he said, practice. He knows when to do that because he has been practicing. So I think it's a fabulous question, definitely. I hope the answer was helpful to the person who did it. Thank you.
All right, Carol, because you spoke about peer support earlier, I want to ask you this question. How can students help destigmatize mental health concerns amongst their peers? So destigmatize mental health concerns among peers. How?
Well, like Alan said, sometimes we're the only roadblock there is. And you'd be surprised how many people are actually suffering, but they don't speak on it. You'd have people who seem so normal and they're really going through a lot of things. So there's not really anything to stigmatize. It's just fear. So what I would say is, as I said before, create a friendly environment. Find someone that you feel like you can connect well with, because there is power in numbers and word gets around very fast. So find someone that you could create a friendly environment with, where you can correspond with, where you can share your own experiences, because you're going to be limiting yourself and you need the help. You want to bring about change, and change can't really happen if there are limits. And one of the things with advocacy is that you're bringing about change from the norm. So just find someone that you could find, like, I'd like to say, hominess in, and you can build from there. People sometimes hide things, and you'd be surprised when you finally open up to someone else. They'd be like, hey, I was thinking the same thing too. Or I was afraid of saying that, but you said it, so now I feel empowered to do so. So really, you're breaking down that barrier of stigmatism.
Yeah, so I think what you're saying is that advocates can be change makers, which is very well said. It's an excellent, I guess, message from this discussion. So Danielle, I have a question for you. One of our attendees asks, how can schools and teachers better support students during this difficult time? So schools and teachers.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned that I was lucky to have this, but I know not all schools do, especially during COVID time. I think just teachers being available to have one-on-one conversations with students and being able to, I know that school can be very hard and not everyone is good at learning online. So being there outside of class for students to really have a safe and comfortable environment, especially during COVID times, I think that's extremely important.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Mackenzie Gooding. It's a very long question, and I'm going to give this one to Priyanka. So this person says, I'd like to hear from one of the panelists about the very blatant divide between private and public sector schools in terms of available resources, and how that is reflected in how the issue of mental health is or isn't addressed among not just students, but teachers and other stakeholders in the school system. So,
well, to answer that question, I would definitely say that it's important that we all understand that we all have the same rights. So no matter whether you go to a private school or a public school, you must and you should definitely have the right to an education and all the resources that come along with it. No one should have less or more, but you have the right to an education and you have the right to all those resources that come with it, and you have the responsibility. A student who may go to a public school has the same responsibility as a person who attends private school to do their homework, to attend their classes, to be responsible in class, to be respectful to their teachers and peers. And I think in regards to mental health, the same resources should be given. I think that mental health is an issue that we all face, and something that is given in both public and private schools with teachers, counselors, and students. And I think it's something that needs to be targeted at the same level. You know, at the end of the day, we're all students, we're all young people, we're all going through the same problems, and we all need to come together and work at it as one. Nobody should be put as a priority less than the other. And I think that it's important to look at us as one. As this pandemic has shown, we are stronger together, and in unity there's strength. So I think looking at the issue of mental health in private and public schools needs to be shown in unity.
Okay, thank you for that, Priyanka.
Sorry, Ashley. I wanted to say also, Priyanka answered this question so excellently. In St. Lucia and on the National Students Council and with National Youth Council, we have the phrase that education is a right, not a privilege. And I see most of them there on the chat, and they would be more than happy. Our founding fathers of the NYC in St. Lucia, National Youth Council and the National Students Council really carried on that message when they introduced universal secondary education in St. Lucia, that every child in the country has the right to a secondary school, has the right to an education. No, and especially as a student leader, it's something we reiterate all the time. No student or no child should be limited to an education. No student or no child should be pushed away from the education system. Our Education Act gives that it is compulsory that a child between the ages of, think of 2 to 16 or 5 to 16 years gets an education. The Education Act in St. Lucia also speaks, and Priyanka said that also, that every student has a right but a responsibility, and our public relations officer said a quotation similar to that recently. As much as our education is a priority, we as students, we have a responsibility. And I don't think whether you are going to private school or whether you're going to any other school that there is such authority over one another. Everybody is learning the same thing. We are all preparing for the same thing, to be integrated into a society where we must all work together as one. And if she's saying this, that there is a divide in the school, that divide there goes on into society. Because at my alma mater, my primary school, our school motto is not for school, but for life. Whatever that you teach at school, it carries on into life. School is where you build a holistic child. School is where you develop a full citizen. And if there is a divide from now between this carries on into society, and people would think that maybe I'm of a certain privilege or something. And we don't want a segregated society. We want everybody together as one. We want everybody learning the same thing. We want everybody getting it's equal rights for everybody in a country. So we must always look for ahead with our education system and understand that it's important that whatever we start off in the root, it will grow up into the tree.
Thank you very much, Alan. I have one question now from Erin O'Neill. What is the specific data? I think I'll give this to Dr. Caetano or Tara. So what is the specific data on the negative impact of extensive use of social media on mental health? With schools going online, it seems this has given kids the green light to always be on their devices. Tara, do you want to say anything about this?
Sure. I am not sure that I can answer to the specific data because I haven't done research in this area, but I do know that, as some of our panelists have touched upon, spending more time on the screens and not being able to go outdoors, not being able to interact socially does have negative side effects for our mental health. I don't know about social media in particular, because I know that there are dichotomous views on the community that can be built on social media platforms. Some of them can be very healthy and encouraging and can be supportive in a time like this where you're not otherwise able to interact one-on-one, or as Dr. Caetano said, we have physical distance rather than social distance. So social media can help to bridge that different distance. However, too much time on the devices, too much time on social media, and falling down what I would call a social media black hole that reinforces negative thinking and reaffirms some of the negative emotions that someone might be experiencing in that time is detrimental to health and mental health. So I would say it's just about a balance. It's hard to enforce in a strict and authoritarian manner when the social media is also assisting in social connection, but finding a balance between time on the screen and time outdoors, especially in this age where we need to prioritize physical health, being outdoors in the limited spheres that we're allowed. And as Caro said, just get outside and lose yourself in nature. And this may be more appealing to some kids than others. Some, like Danielle, might want to partake in sports or group activities as socially distant or physically distant, as safe as possible. Or like myself, I am very fortunate to have a loving dog who I get to take out for walks every morning. So making that a family activity, taking your kids out for morning walks with the dogs, or as soon as they finish classes at the end of the day and sitting in front of a screen for hours at a time, when you get home from work, you all can just go on a walk in the neighborhood together, and finding that balance between how much time they dedicate towards the devices and how much time they're just spending there because they don't have anything else to do, if that makes sense. I'd love to hear Dr. Caetano's input as well.
No, I think you did very well in terms of, looking at, I don't have any data. I don't think we from PAO have done any data on that, but I know there have been some research in terms of trying to see what is the impact of the use of like cell phone or internet. But the important thing here, what we're looking at is that whether, I like what you were saying in terms of you spend time with your pet, with your dog, that's valuable for you. But if you're going to neglect that for being more on your phone, that's something different, because what we're looking at here is whether someone is developing more of a addictive behavior, or they become more, and it could be self-destructive because they have more fun with the internet or with their phone than with individual, than connecting with people. So the question to think of that, the question to ask themselves is, do you think that your academic work or your performance has been negatively impacted because of the use of your cell phone? Do you think that life without the internet is boring, empty, sad, non-existent? And the fact that you're able to go and do things that are outside the internet is because life can be exciting without the internet. But when the answer is that no, you cannot live without that, so we're starting to think of addictive behavior. I think the issue of balance is definitely relevant, and because people who are going, will have self-destructive behavior, or they're having this addictive lifestyle, so they may gravitate more for internet than having a normal, or I don't know, normal, but a healthy lifestyle. So that's what we are looking for, having a healthy lifestyle. So motivation for going online is important. We're online right now. This is so important that we do this. But we have a time when this will end, and that's it. And then we have other things we have to do. So then it's knowing when to stop, how to utilize that time. Now, I know that I've heard some studies where they look at the impact on mental health, and there is also guidelines in terms of for schools and for children. WHO has some guideline in terms of limiting time for, limiting the screen time for children, because yes, there's issue to avoid the addictiveness to this kind of, to technology.
Mm-hmm. And I completely agree. I'm happy that you brought up the addictive behavior and recognizing when that behavior, whether you know if you're addicted or not, is getting in the way of everyday functioning. Is it negatively impacting your schoolwork, your ability to interact with others? Are you not able to pay attention for long periods of time when you're interacting one-on-one? And I think this is a perfect opportunity to address some of the comments and questions that I've seen in the Q&A regarding pathology and any negative emotion that you don't really know how to address. You may not know if you are depressed, and you don't know who you really are or what you really like. And this is something that I think is very important for us to discuss in this sort of forum, because it can be difficult to ask those kinds of questions when you don't have the anonymity or the protection of being physically distant. And so this is one area in which I think social media or online interaction can actually be beneficial to people who are experiencing those concerns or don't really know how to pinpoint their feelings. What I would advise would be to do some research, find some information on the symptoms that you're feeling. If it's that you are unable to get out of bed in the morning, or you've lost interest in things that you once enjoyed, or you're not really enjoying spending time with your friends or talking to your friends the way you once were. If you look into those types of symptoms and talk about how you're feeling in an anonymous way online, then you can A, find a community that may be experiencing the same thing, but B, most importantly, I think in these instances would be to find someone in your region, in your country, who practices in these areas, be it depression or anxiety or withdrawal, and make contact and reach out and find a way through the Ministry of Health or through private practices. There are always resources available, and if anyone wants some resources specific to their countries, please feel free to let me know in the chat which country you're in. But there are always resources available at various price ranges and various opportunities and accessibility that can help with these serious negative emotions that aren't always facilitated in peer-to-peer support.
Tara, thank you for that, because we have one last question that speaks to practitioners' health. So this question is, many times guidance counselors or mental health professionals in the education system struggle to spend substantial time individually and in groups with students. How can mental health professionals maximize their time? That's part one. And then part two is, how can they be more impactful in reaching students during these COVID-19 times? So how can they maximize their time? And then also, how can they be more impactful in reaching students?
That's a very good question. I think the first thing that I will say is, just as Dr. Caetano was saying that teachers are people too, we in the mental health profession are people too. And I mean, we need to find a way to be as present for as many people as possible, and maximizing time can include one-on-one sessions or finding a way to make an individual feel validated and seen and heard, but it can also involve group sessions. And I think this is a perfect intersection of what we've discussed with peer support versus professional help. Just before this webinar, actually, I was in a group therapy session and facilitating conversation between a collection of peers who feel safe and secure enough to talk about their negative emotions and their unhealthy behavior in a professional setting, led by a professional, but with a group that can empathize and understand. And in terms of maximizing time, and particularly reaching students and having as large an impact as possible, I think in these times where so many people are experiencing similar anxieties or similar symptoms and feel isolated, something like a group therapy session or finding common ground and offering professional guidance in that setting can be very impactful.
All right, and Dr. Caetano, do you want to expand on anything that Tara has said?
Tara has said a great deal that I totally agree with. You know, it's very important that people, when they're providing services, a healthcare provider, and it's not only about mental health care providers, even in general, as long as you are in the field of providing care, I think it's important that you know how to take care of yourself. Either, you know, educators, healthcare providers, mental health care providers, they also need to be able to know how to take care of themselves. And so we model healthy behavior. So you know, they can also be your own role model. So I think it's definitely relevant that they can provide people guidance, how to protect themselves, how to protect others, what to do or not to do that. Because otherwise, I had mentioned it before, the issue of want to help, but instead of helping, you're just causing more distress. Mm-hmm. And that is not what we want. We want to be able to be available. We want to be able to use all our senses, know how to listen, know how to see things, know when to speak, know when not to speak. So those things are very relevant in this field, especially nowadays. So you find time for yourself where you can be quiet. You find time for yourself where you can recharge, so that when you're giving everything. You're not half giving, you're giving everything. When you're there, you're present. And so I think it's a time of how they organize themselves, how they take time to protect their mental health, those things. But Tara, definitely you've done a fantastic job in bringing these things to the forefront. So I think it's a matter of making sure that we learn by repetition. So, I like the idea that we talk about this thing over and over, but at the same time, we provide people some guidance. And then we also, I think the idea of having resources available in the community. Every country has access to mental health services. The issue was said by, I think your name there says Carol, but she said, there's advocacy, and there's stigma. The issue most time is the stigma. People just don't want to go, they're scared. But I like that there was a question about how do we do advocacy? We do advocacy by being upfront, and the best way to fight stigma is by social contact, by talking about these things, and then seeing that people can get better by when they have a mental health condition. But thank you.
Thank you.
Tara and Dr. Caetano, we have two final questions. How can I advise a friend who is battling addiction recovery?
That is a very good question, and I am happy to hear people asking these kinds of questions. I think it goes perfectly with what Caro has said about understanding what your friends may be suffering, even if you haven't experienced it yourself. I would say talk to them. Everybody experiences mental illness differently, be it addiction, be it recovery, be it withdrawal. I could not possibly tell you what that person is going through without having spoken to them myself. So my advice for a friend who wants to be helpful and non-judgmental and empathetic is to just say, I'm here, and I may not know what you're going through, but can you explain it to me and help me help you? It may not get through the first time, it may not get through the second time, but showing that you're patient and that you're caring and that you are there to help on their terms will potentially save a life.
Okay. Dr. Caetano, do you have any thoughts on?
Definitely to be there. You need to be present. I think you need to make sure you are present and not judgmental. I believe you had mentioned that sometimes people don't want to talk because they feel like they will be judged or they'll be attacked. And so they don't want to open up to anyone because, they don't feel comfortable. But creating that sense of comfort and being there, and remember that these moments in people's life are also transient. People grow and change, and sometimes they feel like they will be forever judged because of one time in their life they had suicidal thoughts, or they went through anxiety, or they had depression. So they feel like they'll be forever having depression, and that is not the case. Those are those moments in life. This is, I think, what's important about talking about mental health, making it have this conversation so that we know what to expect, what to do, and then people don't have to feel like this is a forever life. This is not like the case. It's an opportunity to grow and to learn and to continue life and continue living as healthy as possible. So I think the issue of conversation helps, and the issue of knowing that the person is there to support and to, but not to judge or make you feel uncomfortable. That will not help.
Mm-hmm. All righty. I have one question now for everyone, all the panelists. How do I practice better self-care? By understanding myself better and loving myself more. So this is a very personal question, so anyone can answer.
I think the panelists will have great answers to that.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to hear our panelists' input.
Exactly.
Can you repeat the question again?
So one of the attendees has asked, how can I understand myself better and love myself more? So this person is speaking to better self-care routines and so forth.
Okay, I guess I will take a shot at it. So I think it was mentioned before, like figuring out what you like and what you don't like, and figuring out what brings you positive and negative emotions. So realizing that, and especially surrounding yourself with people who bring out the best in you and have a positive environment, and just knowing what you are interested in and what things make you feel good and make you feel like you're in a safe, positive environment.
Okay.
In my previous, when I used to work with people, they will ask me, how do I know if this relationship is good for me? If it gets the best out of you, that relationship is really good for you. So Danielle, you did very well. I knew our panelists will have good answers, but go ahead. I think you guys should have, you have the answers for this question.
I just wanted to add to what Daniel was saying. I was going to say that you can't necessarily grow in comfort, because with comfort, you just get too relaxed. So I would say try different things, because sometimes that zone that you're in, that comfort zone, is actually what's hampering you. Try something more relaxing, something that, even though it's new, I know new things can be pretty intimidating, but you'd be surprised how much it changes your outlook on things. So try to step out of your comfort zone, take time to yourself. You'd be surprised how much self-worth and self-love you discover when you take time to yourself. It's also pretty good to step away from the phone sometimes, because it can be very overwhelming being on social media and you're seeing other people achieving things that you want to achieve, or you feel like you're in a competition per se. So you begin to like feel less of yourself. So I would definitely say step out of your comfort zone, take time to yourself, and also just step away from the unrealistic expectations that social media gives.
Very well said. And I guess that goes back to Tara's points about the balance that we need when we use social media. Priyanka, do you have any thoughts?
If I may just add, I would definitely agree with what Danielle and Caro said, but I would say that it's important to live your life with purpose and think about things that you enjoy and you want to do, and things that set goals for yourself and things that you want to achieve in your life, you know. Set goals for yourself and things you want to achieve in the future, or even things you want to improve on. And I think it's important to understand that you have to love yourself first. You need to understand that your biggest support in your life will probably be yourself, and it's important to put yourself as a priority and address your needs and address things that you want to see changed in your life, because the only person who can really change your life is yourself, and you have the power to do it, and you will have the biggest impact on your life.
Okay, so one final question, and I'll actually give this one to Tara. What are the signs of depression?
That is a great question. I went through, sorry. I actually went through a few of them earlier when I was talking very generally about pathology and negative emotional experiences, but the typical trademark behavior associated with depression would be withdrawal, lack of interest or pleasure in activities that you once enjoyed. As Dr. Caetano mentioned, it should be, in order to be diagnosed as depression, it should be negatively impacting your ability to function in academic, professional, and or social interactions. It would also involve, but does not necessarily depend on suicidal ideation, any thoughts of escape or harming yourself, or thinking it would be better off if I wasn't here, the world would be better off without me. There are varying degrees of how someone can experience depression, and there are various periods that it can last for. So I'd say that it would be very important to get to know exactly what you're experiencing and how that might fit into the category of depression. But also, if you can't say that it necessarily checks all the boxes, that doesn't mean that you're not suffering from a depressive episode.
Okay.
Dr. Caetano, did I miss anything?
Oh, no, you did very well. I mean, but one of the things that, because it's very common, depression is very common, and I remember you were going through some of the symptoms. Now, maybe what we want to make sure is that the issue of clinical depression and the issue of just being depressed. You know, we all get depressed because we fail our exams, or because our best friend didn't call, or because we didn't get our favorite food the day when, you know, for our birthday or something. So those things can happen. What Tara was talking about is clinical depression. So there's two things that we need to, so, you know, we talk about issue with sleep, lack of sleep, too much sleep, or too little bit of sleep. Eating too much or not, you know, or eating very little. The mood, your mood. So the mood could be miserable or irritable. And then your concentration and your poor concentration, lack of motivation. But there's two things that are also very important is something we call, and Tara knows this, something we call anhedonia, which means the lack of pleasure. So you're miserable, you're feeling irritated, you're not sleeping well, but there are things that you still enjoy doing. That's not depression, because depression doesn't allow you to enjoy the things that are important to you. So constantly the mood that is depressed throughout the day, almost every day, and the lack of joy. So if you are then this is what is important, that you know yourself, because you know that when you're your friends, that's a joyous moment. You're happy, you enjoy that. But now you're with them and you don't even enjoy that. You're lonely even though you're surrounded by them. So those are the things that are important to know about depression. Depression is very common, and I'm glad they asked about depression. One of my favorite disorders to treat, because it's treatable, it's manageable. It's one of the few illnesses in psychiatry, in mental health, that we can treat, and the person can get better when they have depression. So that was a good question, and Tara, you answered it correctly. I just wanted to add to that. I have to leave you. I have another meeting. This has been a fantastic opportunity. I feel comfortable to be part of this. Happy to be part of this panel. Great panelists. It's an honor for me, and comfortable to leave because I know Tara is with you. So you guys staying in great hands. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you very much. We've really enjoyed having you here, and thank you for your contributions and your time. And I hope we can see you again in the future.
Definitely. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Alrighty, well, that wraps up the question and answer segment. So we'll now have closing remarks from the HCC Advocacy Officer, Danielle Walwyn.
Thank you, Ashley. I am honestly blown away. I'm blown away by the conversations that we've had today and the space that we created to have these conversations. And so it's my honor, honestly, to say a huge thank you to our partners, PAHO and UNICEF, for allowing us again to create this space for us to have these critical conversations. Huge kudos to our panelists. Thank you so much for being so brave, for sharing your perspective and insight. Ms. Danielle Treasure, Ms. Caro Knight, Mr. Alan Plant, Ms. Priyanka Lala, and of course, Dr. Keitano, thank you. Huge thank you to our moderators, Tara and Ashley, Healthy Caribbean Youth, and further, our Healthy Caribbean Youth who helped to brainstorm this idea, so specifically Christopher Laurie, Julia Mandeville, Lonnie Richards, Elena Gomes, and of course Tara and Ashley as well were involved in that. We were thinking about this idea after a webinar that HCC had focusing on reopening schools and what that meant for mental health last September. So I'm so glad a couple months later we could have this conversation. And I would also like to thank our Healthy Caribbean Youth coordinating team. So Ms. Tammy Marie, Carrie Barker, Pierre Cook, a lot of us working behind the scenes to ensure that this was able to happen today. The support of the rest of the HCC team. And then to you attendees, thank you so much for being open, asking all these questions, really getting a good dialogue going. And I think asking a lot of questions that so many of us have had, but may have been hesitant to ask. So thank you for asking those questions. Thank you for coming, and we hope to see you at future events. And, you know, there were so many things that we could take away from today, but I think the three things are, again, children have a right to health. They have a right to healthy school environments, and they have a right to environments that help to support them both mentally and physically. Secondly, there are short and long-term things that we can do. So things that we can start doing from tomorrow, as you heard from our panelists, to really help us work towards optimal mental health, and that there are things that we can do individually, and there are things that our environments can do to help support that. And lastly, I think it has been made very, very clear that youth need to continue to have a platform to raise their concerns and to discuss with other youth and have a multi-generational conversation as well, which we're able to have today. Just another reminder that not only do we bring youth into a conversation just so that they can have a voice, but we need to integrate them meaningfully before change starts, during change, and after change. So those are my 3 takeaways to you. I'm sure you've all taken away so much more. Wishing you a fantastic rest of the day. Stay safe and stay well until we meet again at another HCC webinar. Thank you.